The contender region is firmly at the bottom of the Sorare food chain when it comes to the hierarchy of the regions of the divisions and the makeup of the new mold as we're going to see going forward. But for me, it is clearly the most slept on of all the regions because the name of the game, as you've seen on the channel with other videos that we've been making in light of the new roadmap and the new changes that are going to be coming out, is number one, playing for cash, and number two, trying to move your club and trying to move your cards over time, you know, depending on how long you see yourself playing the game or however long you stretch your objectives and your target setting against into Champion Europe, where the biggest and best prizes for cards and cash are there to be won. But not everyone has the budget, of course, to start off in Champion Europe, which is why we do look for those backdoor entries or those trapdoors that we can use with our budget or scouting to really make up the difference for the cards that we can't just outright afford to go and buy. How do we go and win the next big up-and-coming players? How do we get a stack of a team that is going to be competing in some of the biggest leagues in European football? And the contender region for me has got some absolute standout, virtually quite nailed on strategies, forecastable outcomes of things that you can build your Sorare club around, knowing that you're making progress in the objectives of making sure that you're going to be competitive for new season cards to play the in-season cash tournaments, as well as guys that can organically transfer themselves into the champion region, whether that be individually or as an entire club. In the video today, we're going to be looking at exactly why the contender region, division, whatever, is the number one route to go for all Sorare managers on a budget, no matter how long you've been playing the game for. At any point in the video today, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel. We are pushing for 10,000 subscribers. If you're looking for an explainer just like this one for any of the other regions in Sorare, I'll link them at the end of this video as well, so you can check them out when you're done here. And yeah, let's just get stuck straight into it. Now, in essence, what we've got here is the Champions region. The Champion Europe region is the best 5 leagues in world in European football. And in the Challengers region, we've got that middle band of across world football of European and non-European teams that are, that are cultivating good teams that are competitive in continental competition, as well as, leagues that do house some of the best players in world football, whether at the very beginning of their career or perhaps maybe even at the very end. And the contender region, quite simply, is everyone else. Whether it be in Europe or outside of Europe, it is basically every other league that Sorare has coverage and licenses for are all battered in together into the contender region. And when you see it laid out with the 3 regions here, it's why I kind of said in the intro, it's clearly bottom of the food chain here. It's the least illustrious of all the competitions, and in terms of the general players that do boss these teams and run the leagues hard for goals and assists and all that good stuff, are less known names, or not household names across European football. But as we look at some of these leagues, there is a lot of clubs and there's a lot of known quantities across this entire region here. And if you're thinking about the European calendar in particular, there is 2 clubs here that offer a fantastic route to go on Sorare for so many of the different angles of success that we're looking to capture against any season, whether it is having a competitive in-season collection of cards that can go on to try and actually win the in-season cash, or a club that we have the ability to maybe hit that dynasty level on the collection game where we can, compound season on season, a dominant team within a domestic league. But the jeopardy with dominant teams in domestic leagues is, where do their players move to when they leave these teams? And number one, top of the list here, who granted are not actually top of their domestic competition right now, but generally win the Croatian league, 8, 9 times out of 10, that kind of thing. Had a decent run in Europe this year, which is quite unlike them. Recently, they've had some really big sales, but what we're seeing from Croatian football a little bit now is some of the big expensive exports that have moved to some of the bigger European clubs are coming back to Croatia. Not all necessarily to Zagreb, but the likes of Rijeka, Split, and a few other clubs that in this division do produce high quality, high level talent. But Dinamo Zagreb in particular, as we look at the squad, there's a lot of different players of different age brackets. A lot of them are youth internationals, either for Croatia or whatever nation they come from. But Dinamo Zagreb have got a very strong track record, very much akin to the likes of Porto, Ajax, Benfica, etc. Consistently, the best players at Dinamo Zagreb that help them to, go on and win the league, have runs in European football, really do catch the eye of the scouts out and around in European football. They tend to move to the very top of the food chain. Now, in the last transfer window, a lot of these guys moved in to the Challengers region, Livakovic, Ivanusic and Satalo. But typically, the best, the standout players at Zagreb are producing the likes of Vrancic, Orsic, Jakic, Guardiol, Lovro, Mayer. These types of players that Zagreb are consistently producing, over a longer period of time. There is like 1 or 2 of them a year that do break out and make a transfer. Not always to Champion Europe, but the best ones very clearly on a regular basis do make the transfer there. And because we've got clear routes of, transfer activity already from Zagreb, this is a club that we can definitely build, that collection around that are going to be dominant in their league. And or when you're building it, is probably the better way of saying it. The standout players that really make the stack viable, that make it competitive, when they do reach that kind of critical peak of form and prospect, etc., they more than likely are going to move into a Champion Europe situation. Now, some of them hit the ground running, some of them don't. But this is an inevitable part of football. And if you're able to consistently have a club that produces the quality of players like Brekalo, Brozovic, these kind of guys, some of them, Pjaka and Rog are some of the guys that have actually just came back to Croatia, then domestically you're going to have guys that are going to score very, very well, but also have the prospect of moving on somewhere else around European football and making a name for themselves as well. And ideally, we're hoping for them moving into the Champion Europe section and being extremely competitive. Now, just having Zagreb, just having one club doing this, it would take a very long time to build up a Champion Euro cohort or region or whatever. So maybe this runs in tandem with maybe something else you've got cooking and a few opportunities that, again, the contender region is going to allow us to do, because in the classic mode, these Zagreb cards and these Salzburg cards, for example, again, very similar to Salzburg in terms of their domestic dominance and their transfer track record, are going to be winning classic cards from this region, which does include all of these other teams that are included in the division, not just Salzburg, not just Zagreb cards, etc. So you will have some other opportunities through the cards you'll be able to win with these ones happen somewhat organically. And when you're building a club in these new regions, you're going to have to deal with players that don't fit in perfectly. But as you can see with the roster that Zagreb have at the moment, and lots of dominant players, their individual main problem at the moment is the amount of rotation they have. Now, obviously, Salzburg have got this really strong connection with selling players to RB Leipzig, which we can see transfer window upon transfer window reoccurring. But even seeing the likes of Philip Cohen go to Monaco, Okafor go to AC Milan, which hasn't happened to work out fantastically great. Adeyemi going to Dortmund. Some of these other guys I think have been quite unlucky with the transfers that they made, like Brendan Aronson, Christensen, Mo Camara. But consistently year on year, Salzburg are selling players for 20, 30 million plus. And when that's the sort of transfer tag or the transfer fee that goes alongside the players that you're bringing through, like Dominic Szoboszlai, I beg your pardon, and Hwang here like 3 seasons ago, then who can afford those players? It is only Champion Europe clubs. And again, we are talking about Erling Haaland, maybe a bit of a unicorn situation here, but it is the good and the great of European football that are picking players out of these talent factories, these academies, to bolster their teams. Some of them, obviously, Erling Haaland, like I say, a bit of a unicorn situation here. But even some of these other guys, like Manis Dabur, Javor Schlager, Minamino, there's lots of guys that have walked through this club and these other clubs that we're featuring that go on to have really strong careers in Champion Europe. Some of them maybe like an Olmo type or Szoboszlai, maybe they become a bit more of a stellar name across European football. But when you pick these guys up for Salzburg and for Zagreb, make no mistake about it, they will be delivering most weeks, but you'll need to keep with Salzburg a bit of a handle on the rotation or whatever. But it's not just in European football as well. And like we've seen over the last couple of seasons in particular, South America is one of the most well-trodden routes into Europe. And right now, the poster child of that is River Plate, who at the moment have got a really nice squad of up-and-coming, emerging wonder kid type talents. We've just seen Echeverri make the move to Man City, as well as Julian Alvarez a few years ago, and obviously Enzo Fernandez made a lot of headlines across the Sorare community for being so fantastic at River, at Benfica, and obviously at Chelsea now doing pretty well. So the scale up there has proved pretty good. And that's gave more clubs even more confidence to shop in Argentina. And although River Plate are definitely, head and shoulders above at the moment for the best academy, the best kind of squad of players that will have some domestic dominance, and, the Argentinian league doesn't have the highest scoring of games in terms of goals getting scored or whatever, but these players can score the points needed to go on and win things on Sorare itself. And maybe the jeopardy isn't as much with River Plate and the other teams that we have in Argentina that the biggest and best players walk into European teams, but sometimes it is like the emerging talents, maybe some of the guys like Echeverri, who has barely kicked the ball for River. Nico de la Cruz moving to Brazil is a bit of a different one, but Beltran moving to Fiorentina. We've got the aforementioned Enzo Fernandez in the last window, and Julian Alvarez. But it is getting even thinner in terms of that production, that regularity, that high quality player leaving the club, going into the best teams in European football. Because also River Plate being in the Americas, they do transfer to America, they do transfer to Brazil. as well as, some other clubs within Argentina and that kind of thing. So it's not as quite as nailed on. There's Ezequiel Palacios here 3 seasons ago. Season before that, not much is going on. Pity Martinez is a bit of an anomaly, sadly. Lucas Alario, Sebastian Druise the year before that. And then after River is when we really need to zoom out a little bit and look at the native leagues and look at the native divisions. What talent, what quality of player are they producing and do they hold? Because really, beyond these 3 teams, it does get really sketchy for regular production of high quality talent that are going to dominate their own domestic division, as well as potentially make that move further on and beyond. So River, there is some track record there. There is a golden generation or 2 coming through, and we do have 4 other clubs licensed across Argentina. And the way that some of these teams loan and transfer their players into, maybe the MLS as well as with one another, you do get the opportunity to pick up some cards. And the best way to identify some of that talent has been tuned into, maybe like the River Plate, the Rosario, whatever team it might be, Racing, whoever it is you're going to be following in this division. But River, Salzburg and Zagreb in particular, very firmly champion Europe talent factories in that sense. And a hybrid combination of those 3 clubs, you're looking at maybe producing 3 players a season that could be moving into champion Europe. Now, these 3 clubs are clearly number 1 in their domestic leagues for prestige, for regularity of producing high quality caliber of player and, holding good quality of players to have that domestic dominance. But in every one of these leagues, there is other teams that are, worthy contenders. Hajduk Split, Sturm Graz, as well as, the teams in Argentina that are licensed or whatever. So there is even budget alternatives of teams that do offer something quite similar to those ones at the top of their domestic food chain that maybe allow you some of that same exposure for maybe not quite as expensive as even they are, although they are much cheaper than their champion and even their challenger counterparts. But once we get past these 3 squads, really, if you're looking at exposing up and coming, array of talent from a league, you're going to have to do that probably across the division, because so many other clubs in European world football at this level don't have the biggest amount of resources, don't have a concentration of resources to be able to regularly produce themselves or through transfer activity high quality players on the regular. And like I said, there is some other teams that are like the would-be contenders, the would-be challengers in that domestic competition. But once we move away from Argentina, we're looking at the other divisions: Austria, Croatia, Scotland. Obviously Celtic are a huge stack, a huge powerhouse, but we really need a goalkeeper for next season to try and help us get on that clean sheet run. But really, to be quite frank, Celtic do sell into Champion Europe, which is fantastic, but it doesn't happen actually as regularly as we would like. And some of the big success stories out of Scotland moving into Champion Europe recently, the likes of Lewis Ferguson, Aaron Hickey. You've also got the Celtic contingent of guys like Tierney and Edward and Van Dijk and, whoever else. But a lot of them do come from across the league itself, guys that emerged from the Motherwell Academy, the Dundee United Academy, Hearts, Hibs, whatever it might be. They moved to the English Championship perhaps first. So the Scottish League doesn't have quite the same, guarantee network of guys who excel in that division definitely moving into Champion Europe. There's a high chance they move to the English Championship or sometimes maybe even League One in England. The Scottish division sometimes can be tricky for those outgoing transfers, and you do need to be a bit more agile with selecting the talent of the guy that, is going to be a mainstay part of your club, who you're going to follow through their career. You believe that they're going to get a transfer out of Aberdeen and they're going to move to this club or whatever. See, it happens less and less likely in Scotland. But just like Scotland, we also have Japan, who, again, like over the last couple of years, we've got Yokohama, we've got Kawasaki, Vissel Kobe. Some of these teams have been, maybe the ones more active in the transfer market over the last couple of years, but the division as a whole has talent. The division as a whole produces talent, and at the moment there's a lot of love for the Sanfrecce Hiroshima team, but previously Kashima Antlers as well, Kashiwa Reysol. A lot of these teams have had little spells where they produce 2 or 3 players that are very, very useful, that might even get a very favourable domestic transfer if they don't actually make that move into Europe. Now, when players leave Japan and Korea, there's maybe a wee bit more jeopardy that they end up in a Denmark, in an America, in a Scotland, in a Holland or whatever, rather than going straight into England or Germany. Sometimes they might even move to the second Bundesliga, which I had before it was scored, and it was absolute agony. And this is really where, once we've looked at the regions, like we've looked at Japan, Korea, Scotland, the bigger teams in some of these other leagues that we've looked at already, what we should be able to accrue and amass from all this, unlike any other region region on Sorare is a huge amount of options, variety and availability across the calendar for a variety of different situations, because as much as, if you've seen the video, I'll link it at the end of this one, top 3 things that all Sorare managers need to know for now. You need to have your base, you need to have your high collection bonus locked in and secured, but then things are going to happen across the season. Players will transfer, they'll get injured, they'll get suspended, they'll have crap form, and you might need to go back into the market and get someone that doesn't fit your collection, doesn't really fit your gallery, but you know what? They're going to be playing for the next 2 months in fixtures that correlate well with the rest of your club and gallery. And if you're in Champion or if you're in Challengers, you're much more constricted with how many guys that you have that would, you know, tick those boxes, and they will be much more expensive for doing so. So by having this strong kind of foothold in Challengers, you do have much more flexibility to, you know, take the speed bumps to ride the waves of football, of the season, the highs, the lows, and everything else in between. Because I really see this as our roots division, where no matter what your Sorare club level, strength, or, you know, your targets and objectives, the contender region is going to swallow up so many cards over their career that if you don't have a footprint in it at all, whether it is your mainstay thing like it will be for me at rare level with my Celtic cards, then you will lose some really powerful, some really fun, some really useful cards, and, you know, champion collections, challenger collections, whatever it might be, that will find themselves in here through one way, shape or form that, you know, maybe you could still take advantage of and all the rest of it. And when I've been speaking about these different regions, I'm quite mindful of, no matter what you're going to be targeting, you will need to have a little finger in all the pies to make sure that, you know, the club, the gallery you're building, you can make the most of everything that you've got at your disposal at every opportunity. But really, this is where the ultimate trapdoor, the ultimate route to glory comes in this region, and it is the second Bundesliga and the second division European leagues that are covered in this division, because we will get guaranteed 2 teams promoted, and then there's playoffs and stuff like that across the majority of these leagues that go straight into Champion Europe. Now, you don't need to buy these cards. Actually, by owning Zagreb, by owning Salzburg, River Plate, whatever it is, you're probably going to be winning a fair amount of second division Europe cards from La Liga 2, from Bundesliga 2, whatever, from clubs and players of all different shapes and sizes. But these 3 leagues, if you're getting a team that's promoted, fantastic. Hopefully they do well the next season when they're up. They don't get relegated right away. But what these leagues all have is they have players covered in loan moves from the division above, as well as across European football. So by winning players, from buying players from these leagues, potentially you can get some up-and-coming emerging talent that's playing in France in the second division, playing in Spain, playing in Italy in the second division, that's going there to get their minutes, as well as maybe an up-and-coming emerging talent of a promoted team. That kind of thing can happen as well. But because we've got so much access to second division Europe in this region, for me it is the #1 region to really be thinking about building multiple club collections against, because very quickly within one season you could turn a contender collection into a somewhat viable, depending on the club and form and the actual reality of the situation, champion team lineup for the classic competition the following season. If you were able to spot the team, the club that was able to get promoted out of La Liga 2, Bundesliga 2, France 2, Italy 2, maybe it's a team that gets relegated this year, and then we can sprinkle a bit of talent from the likes of River Plate. We can get a nice little collection on the go from Salzburg, because they've got lots of wonder kids. Maybe we play a little bit of under 23 as well. Maybe that's the same kind of thing, but you've chosen to go with Zagreb because they qualified for the Europa League rather than the Champions League, and maybe they're going to have a better season in midweeks as well. Or even having that second division Europe club as your base, as your foundation, and then you run around the rest of the region getting the up-and-coming emerging talents, or even the broken boss players that are like 28, 30 that are not going to make that transfer, and you just buff your team out with high collection cards that cover all the different positions, and then you walk around the rest of the region getting those differentials in, picking the fixtures, picking the matchups, picking the fitness, who's available and ready to rock. You know, Mexico comes into this as well. Again, a league and a division I don't think, unfortunately, has as many successful transfer routes into the biggest teams in Europe. So Mexico's kind of a funny one for me in this region, a bit of a red herring. And Rosenborg kind of comes into this position as well. But the Norwegian, you know, national team, that Norway as a country has been producing Erling Haaland, Martin Odegaard, and a few others. A lot of emerging talent in here. And I don't know if Rosenborg, I've checked their transfer history, they've not been selling much into Champion Europe recently. It's mainly like Denmark, maybe a wee bit of Germany or whatever, but maybe You keep your eye on this team. Maybe they start hoovering up some of that domestic talent. Maybe they start producing a little bit more of it as well. Like this guy Naipan has got a huge reputation at the moment, for example. But even like the Mexico and maybe even like the Rosenborg, what these teams and what these leagues do offer this region as well is giving you a little bit of extra action for those special weeklies, because the special weeklies that do come in, this region has so many different leagues, clubs and whatever that do have unusual, irregular fixture lists, you know, for different months, midweeks and all the rest of it. And from what Sorare tell us for how good the special weeklies are going to be, filling in a team with one more card or making sure you've got bases covered for different months of the year across this region is easier than it is anywhere else. And because, like I've mentioned a few times in this video, it is firmly bottom of the food chain, so many of these options are going to be able to be gotten by Sorare scouts and managers that do know how to spot a player, are savvy, don't mind taking the guy that's not as sexy as the champ guy or whatever to save a bit of money, but to get that guy that will bang out 70s. There's going to be a lot of joy and there's going to be a lot of success in this region, I think, for those clubs and those managers that want to grow with the game, grow with the club and the collection that they're building, maybe through desire, or they don't have the wallet to just start and go and buy a Man City collection and a Real Madrid collection to get going. I spoke quite a lot in the Challengers video about the unique opportunity it offers to kind of mirror image your gallery against the under-23 division, and really I don't think the contender region is much different for that possibility. The teams and leagues that we featured are covered in under-23 talent, like I've mentioned already with the talent pool ID that we're looking for. Unfortunately, a lot of them are scattered between different clubs and they're not really like, you know, collection stackable as easy as maybe some of them in champion or contender, but you still have the ability to have a very eclectic under 23 collection, which could probably go on to win you some very powerful under 23 cards, which will be from world football, and again could contribute to that backdoor opportunity to getting into champion Europe through the contender region. And unlike the other regions, I do feel that managers that do hone their skills and do live and breathe in the contender region are going to have much more of a jigsaw collection, are going to have lots of different pieces here and there, a 1% and 2% collection in Austria, 3% collection in Croatia, and then the 5% collections are from Argentina, and then we've picked up some players in Bundesliga 2 and La Liga 2, whatever. And managers that have more variety and more options have better decisions to make, have better players to call upon, and have that flexibility in the market to maybe reinforce if something wasn't to go their way so much easier than every other region in the game. This is a region that I'll be focusing really heavily on for my own gallery in the rare scarcity. Let me know what you think in the comment section. What scarcity do you think you're going to be targeting your club or exposing your club to in the contender region, if at all? On screen now is some other stuff that I've made that I've already referenced in this video. The top 3 things that all Sorare managers need to know, as well as those other region videos in case you want to catch them. I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.